Warning: this episode contains a brief discussion on the topic of suicide. Timestamps to skip this part of the conversation are in the description.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cosmere Connections. We're a collective of book-loving nerds rereading Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere series. From book 1 to book 16 million, we'll be uncovering every secret connection there is to find. Today we are joined by Swiggity Swoo,
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
John,
My faith has been rewarded.
Kay,
The pain!
and I'm ReaderWarrior, and today we are going to be talking about Elantris, Part 2, Call of Elantris, chapters 33 to 37.
Praise Jadeth.
That be. Okay. So chapter 33. It's a very long one, I know. So
None of
it
these
has been
chapters
3
are
days.
long.
No, they aren't. Um, it has been 3 days since his arrival in Elantris, and Harathan is fading. Darkness surrounds him, and his hunger grows. Then, above him, the moon begins to appear as the eclipse ends. He ponders at the moon's beauty and wonders if he should feel such awe for Shu-Dereth. But Harathan realizes he doesn't need a wealth of passion. He could simply follow Yada's teachings because it made sense to him. Harathan finishes the last of his food and drink from his basket and throws it aside. He was determined and he would succeed. Harathan bowed his head and resumed his prayer. That's it.
That's the whole chapter?
A brief yet important glimpse into the life of an Elantrian.
Kind of, right?
It is so called Elantrian.
Yeah.
As we shall soon see.
Elantrian that can bleed.
Haven't any of you guys ever seen an eclipse?
Yes.
I have.
No.
Last, I think it was April.
Yes.
Me and T went to Vermont to see the total solar eclipse in the path of totality. And
Lucky.
like it was really cool. What he's talking about, like, I totally get that. When you see like these celestial bodies kind of shading the sky, it does give you this feeling of like ooh, there's something bigger than me out there,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And from like what we've... Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to share my little story from that day, but it's really not terribly relevant. So.
I was just gonna say that this seems to be a fairly, not very primitive, but at least medieval, and like seeing the moon disappear for a people like that would be like very eventful and have huge spiritual connections.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
that's what he talks about in relation to the Jeskai religion. Is he talks about how they had a very strong connection to the moon and the lunar cycles um, within their religion, and that because he
Very
makes a
strong
comment that
connection.
he hasn't been paying attention to the lunar cycles and since he left Doolittle.
I kind of want to hear John's story.
Oh, it's not relatable to the story nearly so much as yours was. I was just gonna say, like, where the area I was in, I was working at a technical college that day, and some of the people from the welding class that was a couple of rooms over had actually gone out with a welding mask, and I got to look up through the welding mask at the eclipse. But we were
Awesome.
in like the 60 or 80% band, like we weren't in the totality. And
Yeah.
if you weren't looking at the sun, you wouldn't have noticed anything going on. Like it wasn't even like it didn't even dim so much as like a cloudy day would.
Yeah.
Which
I
is
know
kind of
exactly
bummer,
what you
but
mean.
it was still neat to see, but more from an intellectual standpoint because you don't get that full effect. It didn't have the same force as it would have where you were.
That's interesting because we were because I was here in DC for the total solar eclipse, so we were at 90, we were like 95%, so we actually could feel the like change in the temperature. Like the temperature dropped, it got darker, it got dark enough that like street lights came on, which
Oh
was
That's
really
wow.
cool.
cool. Which was, yeah, it was kind of cool to to see that. Um, and
Mine
we
was.
showed.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say we showed the students, and a lot of them had like really cool reactions to it. They were like really awestruck by it, which was really
Oh,
fun.
that's awesome. Like the kids' reactions. That's so cool.
Hmm.
Ours,
Kids'
like,
reactions are so great whenever they see something new or learn something that they've never been exposed to before, and they're just like awed by it. That's always kind of
Hmm.
neat.
that's definitely how I felt. Like, the sky wasn't just the sky, it was like the light itself started to dim. It was so weird. Like, you've seen sunsets every day of your life, but this wasn't that. It was literally like the light itself was just growing weaker and weaker. And like Kay said, it did get really cold, and it felt
Mm-hmm.
like instant nighttime. And like there was that story I've heard of some ancient battle happening where in the middle of it there was a total solar eclipse and it like stopped the battle, and I couldn't help but think about that. And again with this chapter, like, to bring it back to the book, I thought it was cool. But for Ethan, that's not enough for him.
Which is like a really interesting thing about it as well, because like with a total lunar eclipse, like the moon goes red.
That's cool.
Like,
I've never
in
seen
case
that.
y'all didn't know, have you ever seen a total lunar
Yeah.
eclipse? Like, the moon goes red during a total lunar eclipse.
It's
Cool.
kind of awesome. Like, I get that the point of it is just to be like, oh, this is happening on the same night as like Iodon's crazy, you know, uh, ritual, and like, oh, look at Rathan, he's still out here. But I don't know. It's a fun topic for me, at least.
I have a fun little bit for the spoiler section regarding this set or this chapter. So we'll save that for later, though, because that's not for here. I just want help remembering.
Okay. Anything else for 33 then?
I don't think so.
Okay. Chapter 34. Sadly, to Raoden's disappointment, Shaor's beasts did not return to the people they used to be. Some seemed to be a bit more human, but most seemed stuck in their animalistic mentality. He was their new god, someone who could make unedible food edible, and they proved this by bringing him the wig of Shaor. Raoden had beaten all three gangs. Galadin called them Kayana, or Kayana, or however the audiobook says it, a word for the insane, and Karada agreed with it. However, Raoden only felt pity. What is it called in the audiobook?
Ayana.
Kayana Suli.
Yeah, I think they even pronounce it the same way in the graphic audio version. So we can finally agree.
The chapel had become their new meeting place, where Raoden would study the Aeonic tomes and teach his friends what he had learned. Galadin questioned this, but Raoden said it was in preparation for when he becomes a Hoid. Even though he was putting on a good front, there were times where Raoden could barely move. Galadin asks what this meeting is about, and Raoden says he knows why Elantris is covered in slime. Aeon Ashi, light, used to reside in everything. The Aeons and Elantrians themselves glowed, bringing mold that fed on it, and when the Aeons faded, the mold died, creating the slime. It wasn't a huge revelation, but it was another clue as to why the Reread happened. Karada is impressed and realizes the books must hold many secrets. Raoden, however, has found that much of the Elantrians' knowledge Okay, I don't know why I just ended the sentence there. Has found that much of the Elantrians' knowledge is not in them. For instance, he hasn't found anything about the creation of Seons, simply the passing of them. Seons and their masters were connected somehow, as seen by the orbs going mad when their owners were taken by the Sheod. Suddenly, Dashi runs in and exclaims that Hrathen has been healed.
Yep, he even has lines now. Boy, did I call that one badly.
Yeah.
You'll never hear from him again.
If
Proving on
only.
every episode since.
Keeps coming back.
It's the
He's the main character. Practically. So the Elantrians used to live in slime?
No, they used to live in. There was a fungus that was imperceptible, basically. Like it was like it like grew on everything, but it wasn't like something that got in the way. It wasn't like a bother. It was
Yeah, it was.
translucent.
It was,
So
and it
and then
actually
when
made everything glow brighter, so they
yeah,
were like, okay, cool.
so they it made everything look nicer. So they were like, okay, we can just leave this alone. And then when the light disappeared, the fungus died, and the slime is the result of the dead fungus.
So would that be like a symbiotic relationship? Like the slime makes it brighter for the Elantrians? Or I guess it would be like a partnership? And in return they get to live on the walls?
The Elantrians didn't really need the fungus. They didn't benefit in any like tangible way. It was just pretty, I guess.
Yeah.
So it didn't really offer anything to them, but it definitely thrived on what they did. So it was
Parasite.
kind of, but it didn't
Parasite,
hurt the
almost.
Elantrians either. It was more an incidental relationship.
Yeah, that sounds more accurate.
I don't know if I'm being pedantic or if there's like some actual truth to what I just came up with, but hey, there you have it.
It sounds right to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody got fun stories about mold?
One time when I was in science fair in like the 4th grade, I grew mold on some bread and I won a B+.
The only mold story I have is one time I made like this delicious meal. It was spaghetti and it was beautiful, and right before I was about to eat it, it was in the bowl. Like we had bowls. I went to like put away the sauce and I noticed at the top of the jar, like at the lid, there was a bunch of mold. And I was like, we can't eat this. We have to throw this away.
No.
That's
This wonderful meal that we just made. We have to throw it all away.
I've had a similar thing. I dumped a bag of cheese on top of some pasta that I had just made, and I found like a little ball of mold in one corner, and I was
no.
like, "Oh no, what do I do?"
Okay, I was joking about mold stories.
I know,
Well,
but
you gotta be careful what you wish for.
You opened the floor. You opened the floor.
I
with mold
regret
stories,
it.
Reader.
I feel like our
I gotta
reaction to
stop being
this
sarcastic.
chapter is just like everybody is to Raid and finding out about the mold. They're just like, yeah, it was cool, but it's like, okay,
Yeah.
you want to move on?
Yeah. That's all I got for 34.
Well, all right then. 35.
That brings it to me.
Nice.
Wouldn't it be? Elantris chapter 35. Revenge of the Mold. Serena and her dad are on FaceTime. He's half proud, half scared that it only took her 5 weeks to topple Kai's government. Serena is traumatized from the events at the eclipse, and Iodon has left the chat permanently.
Jeez.
Serena is stress eating, maybe, and her dieting dad is tortured by it, which is funny. It seems like Telri will be the new king, But Serene is not willing to let that happen. She'd do absolutely anything. They're trying to make Royale the new king, even. I wonder if those two facts will amount to anything in the near future. Apparently, the Elantris guards have taken a shine to Tauri, following the money. With loyalty of the guard fading and things looking bleak, Shuden is the one who proposes that Royale proposes to Serene, making him the new king. Serene and Royale have a touching moment where he validates her and she him, and they agree to the engagement, which will be a short one. 4 days away at Iadon's funeral, actually. But one man's funeral is finally over. Apparently the Gjorn has been feeling better. And that's the end of the chapter.
Wow.
This is a short one.
It
Short
was.
chapters. It's short chapters all around this week.
Punchy.
Okay, so does anybody have any engagement stories?
Only one.
Yeah.
Only one of us.
I feel like
think.
my mold story, if it wasn't an engagement story, would be like getting left at the altar.
Oh, jeez.
Kinda. Or worse yet, it would be like your bride collapsing and then like her heart exploding right before you say I do.
Jeez.
Or you go to like, you take the veil
Tragedy.
away and it's just mold. Oh no! Not again.
Lifts up the veil, it's just mold.
Just mold again.
It's just a mushroom.
I'm deleting Tinder. This is
3 mushrooms in a wedding veil.
that sounds like a Cosmere planet we'll get.
You never know. We could.
Okay.
Last of Us World.
Well, the system is an Airlon. We had talked about it earlier. Dios are the monetary units.
Oh yeah. I'm glad you called that out.
I got a sneeze stuck in me. Somebody else read my notes. Ah!
You good? Okay, was that your sneeze
Still.
from earlier?
Okay.
I think that was my sneeze
No, not
from
yet.
earlier that went and somehow
It's
transitioned
contagious.
all the way across the ocean.
I really okay. I know this is a bit weird to say, but I like that Iadon took the coward's way out because it further showed how it encapsulates his character. Like he was that kind of a person who would.
Well, I wouldn't say that he took the coward's way out. I didn't think that they described it like that. They more described it as the only honorable thing left for him to do.
That's what they said Eondel gave him the rope for, is because
Yeah.
he saw it as the only honorable act. I greatly disagree.
Interesting.
Because he needed to, whatever court of law system they had, he killed how many workers, maids, cook clerks, and so he's just like, nah, I'm not going to face any of it.
Yeah, that's kind of cultural though. Like we don't know how their culture views things like self-termination or
Mm-hmm.
ways to maintain honor. I mean,
What
we don't.
do
Yeah,
we
I'm
even
not
know what
how
their
they view that.
like prison system is like? I mean, how do
No.
haven't really seen very much of that.
Yeah, all we know is that there are palace dungeons.
Yep.
But it wasn't. There was a thing about like somebody supplying him a rope.
Yeah.
So-
Eondel.
It's
Gave him
almost
a
like
rope.
it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't like it was Iadon, like trying to. It was almost like, as was described, like what was the only honor thing left to do. Like, it kind of made it sound like.
But the
More so
way-
than this being his decision, it was like the protocol.
Nah, because
Like,
the
oh,
way
you've
that
been
Serene
found
kinda
out.
worded is is kind of like a military man went to him and said, "Hey, this is the only thing you can do." In which I greatly disagree with that. But the way that Sereni's kind of worded it is that Eondel, a man of a fighter, basically said, you can either go stand in front of everybody and admit to everything, or you can have one last fight, I guess,
Well,
against
no,
yourself.
it's you can either stand in front of everyone, admit to everything that you did, and show the fact that the crown is weak, or
Yeah.
you can do this and at least retain some sort of honor and some sort of like faith in the crown, at least a little bit.
Yeah.
There's also something of a mercy in a way, because even though they were rivals recently, they were friends in the past. So it was kind of a way for him to spare his friend embarrassment.
The Count thinks like a
I see.
warrior, and this was a very efficient solution. We don't have to force an abdication, and suicide restored some dignity to the monarchy.
Yeah.
It just, for me, it shows how much of a coward and a weakling the King Iadon really was. Like,
I
he
mean,
wouldn't
there was no good outcome here.
There was
like-
no good outcome, but it,
And
I agree with
he was
Reader.
going to be killed either way.
yeah,
But
but this is the character, like, being scared and, like, admitting what I did was wrong, and, like, I can't face that. And, like, that's something we've seen Iadon sort of be like. I mean, he got yelled at by Sereni, and he started to cry.
I don't
Yeah.
disagree with you that he is weak and a coward. I do disagree slightly that the path he chose is cowardly. I think you have to have, to be in a position like that, I think you have to have a certain amount of resolve and a certain amount of willingness to face whatever comes after to be able to do that. Because we all have some sense of self-preservation, and to step beyond that, certainly not in every case, but potentially in this one, is something that takes a little courage, especially if you know you have failed in your religion, lied about another religion, and are and have a belief in the afterlife. Like, you probably aren't destined for a good thing.
I get what you're saying, and I will say there are two very different paths that get to suicide. There's running away from something that you've been forced. But okay, so there's, okay, we're not trying to make this into that kind of, but there are people who have the back.
Saying,
Right.
There are people who like have done bad things and view it as their only other option, and then there are people who don't feel like there is another option. And he clearly has, like, he can face judgment. He can say, yeah, I did those things because what I was doing what I thought was right. Granted, it was wrong, but I feel like, yes, there are examples of where self-termination, suicide, isn't a cowardly choice. I will not stand and try to say suicide is never the answer, but I think there's always a better option. But for Iadon to, like, ignore, like, yeah, he might have been executed, or he could have been sentenced to prison, or we don't know how their court system worked, but he could not face, like, any disgrace towards him as a person and abandon ship.
But it's not just the disgrace. It wouldn't just be the disgrace towards him as a person as well. He represents the throne.
Right.
It would also be a disgrace towards the throne as well.
And as we find out shortly, he actually does care pretty strongly about Kai and, the stability of the kingdom.
But like within the framework of the book too, we have like one character who's struggling with all this pain constantly and hopelessness, and there's like this sweet release, right around the corner now, or has been for a couple chapters. And then we have Iadon, who like just embraces that end. And I do think maybe like that would be a comparison that the book is trying to make, of showing like it's more heroic to face whatever it is you've got coming to you.
I think the theme of the book is sort of, you have to fight against pain. You can't let it force you into submission.
But there is probably a point where a soul becomes just too lost, I think, and that is truly cowardice. If you've gotten to the point where there's no part of you willing to defend anything you've done anymore, there's nothing good about it, or even that you've known for a long time and just given up. I feel like that's it. Maybe kind of what you were getting at. Like he shows his cowardice, like in that way. But we should move on. We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah. Fair enough. So, what chapter are we on now?
36.
Oh, that's me. Okay. So, Hrathen is convinced he is going to die. His stunt was foiled by the endurance of the potion he took, and his hallucinations of his days as a boy at Dakor, Dilof, and Sereni all laughing at him, and Wern's disappointment all become overwhelming in his current state. He comes out of his delirium one last time, but as he does, he runs his hands over his head to wipe away the sweat, and he feels the stubble. Ah! He looks at his reflection in a bottle and sees that he is back to normal. Renewed, he rises up and calls out, but there's nobody there. The guards are gone, and Hrathen doesn't remember them leaving. He panics just a bit before the guard captain that he had been bribing opens the door and peeks out to see what's going on. The guard looks Hrathen over and finally lets him into the guardhouse and gets him some drink and food. When the guard tells Hrathen about the death of Iadon and the impending coronation of the new king, Then the guard tells Hrathen about those things, and eventually they go back to the chapel, and he gives a little speech where he notices Sereni even gawking at him and the miracle of his healing. Gives a small speech before returning to his rooms to recover. Dilof shows up and apologizes, and to kind of behold the miracle himself. Like, he wants to see it himself and verify, probably try to suss out any trickery that may have been going on. It's a short visit, and Hrathen goes back to recovering. He sees his belongings piled up in a corner, including the box with his Sion in it. He opens it up and notes the damage to it, but he asks the Sion inside if anyone had opened the box since the last time he spoke to it. And it says no. And he then finds that there is only one vial of the poison that's unbroken. So he summons one of the other priests at the monastery that had been trained in Wrathborn, which are the assassins, if you recall, and he gives it to them, and he asks, "Who is this for?" And the chapter cuts out. Dun dun dun. Suspense.
Dude just hires a hitman.
Yep.
He doesn't even have to. He's got them like in his constant employ.
Yeah.
He's just like, "Hey, you there in the crowd, go kill this person."
Yeah. The only question I really have in this chapter is, how does he already have stubble?
5
What do you
days.
mean?
Well, like the hair all fell out, and I'm assuming the potion wasn't allowing like new hair to grow. So, like
How do you
the,
have stubble the day after you shave
but I'm assuming
your
like the potion
face?
ended fairly
We don't
fairly.
know. We don't know how recently the potion ended because Harathan was in delirium.
That's true.
Yeah, that was just when he noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Presumably, it had run its course at least a day before. Although
It's
he would be
impossible to say.
severely dehydrated at this point.
Well, what's weird is like he says it's 2 days after the chapter I had at the beginning. But then he comments like it's been 5 days since he had anything to drink, but in mine it's been 3 days and he finished off his wine. So it's only been 2 days.
Still, if all you've had is a single flask of wine over the course of 5 days,
Yeah.
that's not a lot of liquids, especially considering
It's not.
that alcohol has a tendency to dehydrate you a little bit.
And then he
Especially if
goes
he's been
back to his
bellowing the whole
room and he
time.
drinks more wine.
Because
Well,
they
that
don't
just
drink
goes back to your point
water.
about water.
Oh, here we go again.
Oh, no.
Remember during the Serenity chapter when they were fencing? They don't drink water.
They could have given him tea? Tea? Something? Gatorade?
Maybe they
Wine
don't have
and
tea.
stubble.
They certainly don't have electrolytes. Or, well,
Chicken broth?
electrolyte-filled beverages.
This
Salt
chapter
water.
was this chapter was crazy. It was really satisfying to see Deloff squirm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's like, how the fudge did you manage this?
Well, he's like, I know there's a trick, but I can't figure it out.
Yup.
I just smell some bullshit, but I don't know what it is. And like at the end too, he's like, well, you know, maybe I did take the poison, but it was Jareth who had that guard be nearby. He's like contorting
Totally
it
not
any which
because I
way.
paid him before.
Well, but even though he paid him before, like, there was no reason for that guard to really be there, considering, like, it was kind of just happenstance that he was there, considering all the guards had gone to, Telri.
And he did get the poison right after he broke down and prayed to Jareth.
Mm-hmm.
Deus
But
Ex
I'm
Machina deliveries.
I'm still thinking
had
it's
ordered
supposed
it
to be
weeks before.
ironic.
So it wasn't complete Deus Machina, but, you know. Praise be to Lord Yadeth.
Anything
Yeah,
else
that's-
for 36?
That's it. That's all we got.
Deus Ex Machina would be if a machine randomly came out and cured all the Elantrians.
Okay. 37?
Yes.
So, this chapter, Raoden is in pain. The wave of pain has come over him again, and it knocks him out of his seat onto the floor of the chapel where he is with Galadon and Karada. And Galadon is like really worried. He's like, "Are you okay? Like, what's going on? Like, what's happening?" And Raoden is like, "It's just the pain. Like, it's fine. Like, it's gone now. It's past." And Galadon is like, "What are you talking about?" And Raoden finally admits to him that the pain isn't constant for him. It comes in waves. And Karada's looking at him weird. Like, she's like, what is wrong with you? And she's like, you were glowing just now.
Are you pregnant?
And we find out that the reason that Raoden is that, first of all, that their people have different levels of connection to the door. There are some people who are some Elantrians who are more connected or less connected to it, who are more powerful or less powerful. And when the Reod first hit, the most powerful Elantrians were the ones who couldn't do anything when the Reod struck. They were unable to fight back at all against anyone as they were being burned. And kind of suspect that Raoden is a more powerful Elantrian. And the reason that he's having these waves of pain is that the door is trying to get through him, is just trying to push through him like it pushes through the Aeons. So that sharp pain that he feels is the door pushing on him, trying to get out, trying to be released.
That's such a cool, idea. The man is literally in pain because magic wants to bleed through his body.
Yep.
I could have
When you put it
sworn
like
he
that,
said.
it sounds kind of painful.
Yeah. But I swear he's mentioned before, it kind of comes in waves. And they just nah, you're just imagining it.
Yeah, Galadon didn't.
Galadon still thinks that.
Yeah.
Nah, you're just imagining it, Sully.
Yep. It's just no, that's not how it works.
You're just being stupid.
I did kind of have that feeling of I guess I was thinking it's weird that they're so concerned with correcting him that the pain doesn't come in waves. Why, that's kind of an awkward thing to bring up. But the fact that he was glowing, I can understand why they're really concerned, wanting to learn more about this.
Yeah, they're like, bro, come on. Glowing.
Wait. Tell us more.
It goes to show, these people are just, one step at a problem while Raoden keeps, thinking ahead. They're like, you're glowing. We need to talk about that. Well, Raoden's like, no, I'm having pain in waves. And, the Aeons are all being weird. And all of the other things. They're like, you're glowing. You gotta be wrong on the other thing. You're just imagining it, Sully.
Right. And, no spoilers, but it's cool because I feel like he's getting so close to, every chapter. He's he's so close to saying it, if that's what it feels like.
It's like, you're right there.
Yeah.
Okay, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
Dang,
That was
I
the
was
chapter.
gonna quick-
That was
Wow.
basically this
Well,
chapter.
This might be a record-setting
was-
episode.
Yeah. Well, there was the thing at the end. What about Hrathen seems to have been healed? And they're like,
Yeah, Raoden doesn't believe that Hrathen's healing was real. Not that he doesn't think that Hrathen faked being an Elantrian. Instead, he's thinking that Hrathen wasn't healed at all. That Hrathen is still an Elantrian. That instead the Fjordelians just came and yanked him out of there, and hit him away. Yep.
I like that. Even though he's got the wrong explanation, he's got the right answer.
Yeah.
Well, anything else for this chapter set? This is a really quick chapter set.
This was definitely some plot advancing stuff.
Yeah.
These are some short chapters.
If I had to sum up today's chapter set, it's kind of good to have these shorter, punchier chapters, because the past couple episodes we've done, I've felt like we've had a couple chapters that were over long, and then there wasn't a ton to say about them sometimes. These ones, like, it felt like we're really moving the story along and, like, approaching Sanderland's territory even.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's some build-up happening.
Yes.
Like, the pace has noticeably changed.
And I'm liking going through it with you guys too, because this book seems to have a lot of little things that are seeded that are easy to miss, like down to the sour melon thing from last week.
Yeah.
Just these little plot points that, like, oh yeah, okay, the sour melons, yeah. Sure.
Well, I guess that's gonna cover this part. Next time we're gonna be covering chapters 38 through 42. One of us is not gonna be here, but we are gonna have a special guest or two. But right now it's time to head into the spoiler realm. So if you have not finished this book, the entire series, or potentially the entire Cosmere, then we recommend that you stop here because it is likely that we will talk about everything and anything. If you are up to date, feel free to stick around because it is likely that we will bring up details you may have missed, like Swiggity said, or plot threads still yet to come. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, star, heart, whatever it is on this podcast, and don't be afraid to comment your own thoughts and predictions. You can find us at CosmereConnectionsPod@gmail.com, at CConnectionsPod on Twitter, and we even have our own Facebook group. We would love to hear from you. But if this is where we must part, then my name is ReaderWarrior, and I have been joined by Swiggity Swoo,
Colo.
John, and Kay.
Have a good one.
Don't forget, there's always another connection.
That's a Chuck E. Cheese, Sue.
That's fun.
And we're back. Spoilers. Chapter 33.
John, you wanted to say something in this chapter.
In 33?
I thought it was 33.
Yeah, about the
No, 36.
yeah, about the eclipse.
No.
No, 36.
Oh, you
I'm
had
pretty sure.
something in 33 about the eclipse.
No, it wasn't about the eclipse. But it was.
I thought it. Oh, it was.
Was it about the eclipse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except
yeah,
I
you
don't
said
remember.
that you had something
Because
to say in this chapter.
obviously I don't know.
I think it was a little later because it has to do with Rathan.
Yeah, this is Rathan's first chapter.
This is
I know, but so
Rathan.
is the chapter I did. I guess either way, it doesn't really matter which chapter. It's not, like, particular to the chapter. So, we have a character in this book who is fervent in his faith because it makes intellectual sense to him. We have another character that we know of who is fervently anti-faithful because no faith makes sense to her. Do we think Rathan could convert Yasna Kolin?
No, but I think that they would have a fantastic conversation.
Right? Right?
They would have
I want to see that.
absolutely fantastic conversation and debate about faith and about like what it like.
I think it would be. I think Yasna would enjoy it because, like, everybody else always talks about belief in faith while Ethan's, like, not at all going about it. But he would still lose because she would be like, okay, what about this thing? He's like, oh, Yadath gave us those gifts.
Honestly, she might convert him to be a theist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's the ultimate religious power in the Cosmere.
She'd be like, "You want to see power? I'll show you power."
I think the fact like he would come about it in a way she's never dealt with would definitely put her off her normal groove.
The pragmatic side of it, yeah. But I almost feel like Yasna and Hrathen do have pretty similar almost worldviews. Like, I can't remember. Does she talk about knowing that honor is dead, honor is the almighty, and therefore Vornism itself can't possibly be true, but like, there might be something beyond the almighty, which we know there is.
That's what
more
Dalinar. That's Dalinar.
Okay. Yeah, I do remember Dalinar saying that.
Yeah,
Yasna's an atheist.
Yeah.
So even knowing what Dalinar has to say about it, she's still...
Yep. Well, she knows that there are powerful beings in the universe.
right,
She just doesn't believe that they're God.
or that they care about, being worshipped or what have you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's the fun...
She's
Like,
quote
well,
unquote dating Hoyd. I mean, and I'm pretty sure Hoyd has like embarrassing stories on all the shards. So
That's the thing about like the Cosmere that's kind of fun though, is you start getting into like, well, what do you consider a god? Do you consider like a shard a god, or do you consider Adinalcium like the true? Like, if you want to get technical,
Do you want to consider? Do we consider the returned gods? Because they're considered
Okay.
gods in there.
and this would be their conversation.
Yeah.
okay, but I'm gonna bring us back to Elantris.
Well, the Elantrians were gods.
Yeah.
Considered
She's the
gods.
Ouse Caller.
Yes. Okay.
Speaking of bringing us back,
So we got an eclipse. Hrathen finally accepts that he doesn't need to have express belief. And that's about it for this chapter.
Yep. Not much.
Okay. Then in chapter 34, we've got Sheor's Kayana. Do they go back to normal after they fix the router Aeon?
Probably,
I don't
to
know
some
if it's called
extent.
out.
But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's specified.
I don't think they say so. Because honestly, I don't think they would.
Raffo.
Can you imagine in book 2 or 3 there's just a pack of animalistic Elantrians just roaming?
That sounds awesome.
I mean, the place to address that would have been the Hope of Elantris, but I don't think it comes up there either.
No.
So I think
Uh,
maybe they kind of are healed in that regard.
I don't think so. It doesn't make sense for them just to be snap healed. It doesn't make sense for like the. It makes a little bit of sense for the Hoyd to be healed, but I think the more recent you are Hoyd to the point of the Aeons being fixed, the more likely you were to return to your old self. I think the people who like have been like stuck in the pain for a long time would require special healing.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess as a sort of counterpoint, we do have a character who has a mental sickness and is Elantrian, whose mental illness is cured when, they fix the primary.
Are you talking about the one brother?
Yeah.
His mental. I don't think his
No, he's
autism
not.
gets healed.
Not really, but he becomes articulate.
But I think that's just because I don't think we have any way to say like that's specifically tied to the Aeon. I think that's more so he's no longer a Sheout.
Yeah, no, he definitely talks to Raoden and goes, "Hey, I can speak and communicate and function somewhat normally now. I don't know how I know it's exactly this number of steps, but there you go." Like, he
But we
definitely
don't
does
know
that.
if like but we don't know if like his family were like telling him no, don't say anything, don't do anything that can get you caught as an Elantrian.
He is non-communicative. He counts off random numbers on his fingers when he shows up in earlier books. He does not
Because
speak really at all. And then he does speak and comments on his newfound ability to articulate after
does he
the
comment on
Aeon
his?
is fixed.
He comments on his articulation.
I don't know if he uses that exact term, but he definitely does.
Let me find.
Spirit, the door gave me Riz.
I feel like my entire life has been a dream. I remember everything that has happened, but I couldn't interact. I couldn't say anything. Okay,
See?
that's changed now, but... Okay. I guess that just seems wrong to me. Okay.
I know Sanderson
Um,
has spoken and having some regrets on the way he portrayed like autism in this book. I wonder if that's kind of part of it.
It could be.
Is
But I
having
think
it be healed.
I think it does give us some basis for being able to understand why
but
the
I would
crazy
say-
Elantrians who have, even if it was voluntarily, given up some measure of their sanity, are not a problem later, because that part of them may very well have been healed in the fixing of the...
But they pushed that part of themselves away. This was, I don't think, Lukel, I believe his name is. Shoot, I should have just checked
no.
it
is the
while I had
cousin.
the book out. He didn't.
I can't remember his name either.
He didn't do that to himself. Okay, I guess we're saying the autism made him nonverbal, and the healing, quote unquote, fixed that. The Kayana are. There's nothing that's making them like that except for their own psyche, and I don't
Yes,
think
but
the
it's still a form of mental
healing
trauma.
would fix that.
It's still mental trauma, whether it's self-inflicted or otherwise. If you get hit
But
in the head with a
autism isn't
hammer, who
trauma.
cares who's holding it?
Yeah, but it's not. But that's not autism. Okay. Okay.
Well, yeah,
We're not
autism
gonna-
is a
Right. That's a totally different.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't know.
Um,
I get what you're saying, and I think you might be right, Reader, because there's obviously it's not the same thing, but in like the case of like Stormlight, it doesn't heal. There's a lot of characters who don't get healed from things that they've had for a while.
But it also
Yeah.
it depends on how you. A lot of the healing in the Cosmere, it has to partially do with your spirit web and how you see yourself. So,
Right.
I mean, I think soul stamps could like help with it a lot, but I don't think just the physical act of healing a body would.
so I think that the wild men, it would have to do with whether or not they still see themselves as being that like feral type
Yeah.
of
We don't even know
person
if
versus
we don't
when
even
they
know
are
if that's
made
how
into-
Aeon healing like does it. That's
true.
Stormlight healing.
Right. They could they could probably be a lot closer to like if the door heals their bodies and therapy heals their minds, maybe they'd be good to go.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. We don't see a pack of rabid Elantrians, but I like what you're thinking. Like I agree with what you're saying. Like I don't know if it would heal their minds. They're so far gone.
At least not immediately.
And like Kay, what you said, I think backs it up too, because like they won't be able to identify themselves as sane.
Mm-hmm.
Then Raoden, Karada, and Galadon have the meeting. They figure out that there was mold.
They are so close to the fact that the one line is missing from the Aeon. They keep getting so close to it.
It is kind of incredible that no one ever thought, hey, these two things happened at the exact same time.
Well,
Like,
I think
I wonder if they're related.
I think they always thought that like the Raoden caused the crack. Like, isn't that part of their thinking? Is that they think the chasm was formed because of all this?
The chasm?
Like it was a symptom of everything happening, not the cause.
I mean, I don't recall it ever being outright stated that way, because if it was, it would be just glaringly obvious to the reader, like, oh yeah, duh. Like, as it is, that you have to kind of like separate those things out and be like, oh yeah, this happened like about 10 years ago. Oh yeah, then the next chapter, oh yeah, this thing happened about 10 years ago. You have to have time for the reader to kind of let that little factoid slip. Otherwise, it would be like, oh, they happened 10 years ago. They obviously caused one another, or one caused the other. Yeah. Like it would, like if it ever was like put that blatantly in front of you, you'd know the end. Or at least I feel like most of us would. Like, it'd be very difficult to put those two things like right next to one another and not have it become obvious.
Anything else for 34?
I don't have anything. Sorry.
35. You got Sereni talking with her dad. You get a mention of the axe that's hanging up in her uncle's house. And the marriage proposal.
The spy. He sent a spy. Do you guys know who that was? I don't remember.
I don't think they named this. I don't think Eventeo names the spy.
Yeah.
I don't think it ever gets mentioned who the spy is.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, because he specifically says that he doesn't know.
Right. So that was just to show how he would know that everything's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's Lynn from the Windrunners.
The spy conversation is a remnant of things I left over from a previous version. I'll talk more about it later. However, if it looked like I was foreshadowing something, well, I was. Fortunately, the thing I was foreshadowing got cut.
Oh.
Well, there you go.
So says the annotations.
Ignore that.
I love how we all completely glossed over the fact that the patriarch, or what is it called?
Do whatever.
Oh, right. The patriarch's coming to town.
Patriarch.
Fabio Pope.
Elaine. Yeah, is coming.
I meant to call that out, but I forgot.
And that Sereni is just like completely over it.
Sereni hates him.
She's like, this guy is a huge
asshole. She's like, I fucking hate that guy.
He is the most arrogant, self-aggrandizing turd. But he has really pretty hair.
Anything else for 35?
Not unless you want to hear me rave like a madman about that guy's pretty hair.
36. So, Harathan, leaving the city. Captain comes out to greet him. And then Deloff is, meets him at the gates. And he's like, how the fudge did you manage this? I'm guessing, he must have, seen the potions.
No, they were locked up in the box with the Sion.
Well, do you think that Deloff actually did talk to the Sion and ordered it not to reveal that it had been used?
No, because Sions have that bond thing, and I don't think a Sion would necessarily be willing to follow an order from someone who was not their bonded person.
But here's the question. Is that Sion bonded, or is it unbonded?
Or is it bonded not to Harathan, but to the...
But to Wern.
The Wern, yeah.
Well, Wern has a different Sion, but I don't know, maybe you can bond multiple? We don't really know enough about how Sions work to answer that question, I think.
Yeah. Let me see. So you can bond multiple.
I think, though, the only way that the Sion would have is if Deloff had revealed his actual rank to it. And even if that was the case, I don't know if it would be really relevant to the story, if it would make an impact.
Mostly everybody's just asked, are their bonds similar to the Nahel bond? So nothing on if you can have multiple Sion bonds.
Yeah, that's tough with only this first book to go off of.
Yeah. How impressed do you think Deloff actually is? Does he actually think this was an act of...
He's definitely some level of impressed. I just don't think it's enough to overcome the suspicion. Because, let's face it, going 5 days without food or water by itself is pretty impressive.
Yeah. It's no 40 days and 40 nights. But yeah.
I think he's more... Yeah, I think he's more just flabbergasted and shocked.
You were gone. I got rid of you. I was all smug about it, and you came back?
How dare you?
Dare you?
Tricky, gun.
And then you get one line about the fact, after he was at the one monastery, he went to the Gajan monastery. And there's zero information about the Gajan monastery.
I think it's just a regular monastery. It doesn't do anything special. Because not all the monasteries do something special.
Feels like they should.
This
if
one
you've got
trains politicians.
Right. If you got one that's the secret assassin one, and one that's the crazy bone manipulating demon one, you gotta have one that makes sub sandwiches or something.
Welcome to Gajan's. How may I take your order?
Everyone need a number of regular monasteries to make enough priests, because otherwise you'd only have a certain number of monasteries, because there'd only be a certain number of specializations, and then you wouldn't be able to have new monasteries in places that you are conquering. So what does the monastery in Kai do? Converts Aerolons.
Make it sound like a factory.
Well, that's kind of how we're talking about it.
Yeah, well, I get what you're saying, right? There needs to be, like, you can't have everything be like there needs to be the religion too. Like they have to uphold
Right.
the basic functions of their religion,
Yeah.
and there's gonna be a whole world of monasteries for that.
It's
Not
like
all of
there
them
are
can be
lots of churches,
specialized.
but only so many of them are basilicas, and of them, only so many are, I don't know, whatever. I'm not. What's more sacred than a basilica, reader? Is there one?
I think so. I don't even think a basilica is more holy than a church.
Well, a basilica is just a church that's been visited by the Pope, so
I guess the Vatican is pretty much number one.
oh yeah, there you go, the Vatican. Yeah.
Pretty holy.
Okay. Anything
Anyway.
else for 36? 37. Okay. So we know why it comes in waves, and that's because he's creating aeons and allowing like a little bit more of the door to seep into him,
No,
right?
no, it's because he is inherently more powerful, a more powerful Elantrian. Like he
Well,
inherently has more power.
I don't think that's why it comes in waves. I think that's why he's so sensitive to it. I think it comes
Yeah.
in waves because it's naturally turbulent.
It might come in
I wanna-
waves for everyone else, but they're not as sensitive to it because they're not as sensitive to the door because they're
Right.
not as powerful. So they don't notice it, so it's not a significant enough change for them to notice the wave.
Also, it's an entirely different source of pain. Like they might not notice that pressure at all.
Well,
Whereas
that leads to my
Raoden,
second question.
especially being more prone to using or trying to channel the door, kind of opens himself up to it, and he becomes sensitive to it. Maybe, you know.
Well, that begs the second question of why is his pain worse?
Well, and that one is because he's more attuned to the door, like because the pain that comes in waves that is different from the pain of his cuts and bruises and bumps and whatever. Because that pain probably is more constant for him. It's just so totally overshadowed by the pain of the door trying to bust through his, entire being.
See, I think it's more so the fact like I know the other people are connected, which that needs a whole other top conversation. But like I think he's doing the aeons and like more of the doors creaking out to him, and maybe it's healing him a tiny bit, like maybe a little millisecond, or maybe not very much, but enough where like he can forget the pain and maybe it holds it there for a bit. But then he feels everything all at once hit him instead of like the gradual step up that everybody else has. He gets hit with everything repeatedly. I think, and I thought maybe that was it.
I can kind of see that.
Right?
I'm
It
not
does-
gonna. I'm not gonna say no because maybe, but
Brandon didn't really
somewhat
give an answer.
I agree more with what John was saying. With
It doesn't seem to me like the door has a natural pulse to it, if only because of one line in his pain hallucination where he talks about it being like a consistent thing pressured up against itself.
well,
but we do
we
know
also
it has.
have to. Yes, we do know that it has pulse because we know that all investiture has pulse
And
and
they
has a pulse to it.
And they explicitly stated it in a book because Raoden didn't understand those terms. So it has things like pulse length and, whatever.
Rhythm.
Yeah.
So it's not. But if we look at the description
I
of
do remember
Stormlight in a sphere, if you hold it out here and you look at it, it looks constant. But if you really focus, you can see it swirling around in there. So it might just be that it's not macroscopically perceptible. You know, you got to really zoom in and focus on it.
I feel like this is why I think Elantris is like my least favorite, because every other book gives an explanation for almost everything, while this one, to be honest, we get very little explanations.
Because it's the first book.
Yeah.
And it's also the earliest in the timeline, so they don't necessarily have. And there was like this whole like big knowledge loss preventing us from really seeing the inner mechanism.
Yeah.
And
It's not
doesn't
the
it kind of
earliest
feel
in
like
the timeline, though.
in a way, the magic system is being used to its most complex? Like maybe some of the other ones are harder to use, like you have to speak an oath or you have to swallow the correct metal. But like this one, it's like, yeah, Elantris, you just get magic, you just get door, and you can even purify it later and use it to fuel whatever. But like the actual mechanics of it, like this is where, like the fact that you can purify a door, this is where you start to see like, okay, what can investiture do? And like for this being the first book, like I'm way more excited to see the Elantris sequels with all the information we have building up to this, to then really find out like how does this actually work in a context like where we have background knowledge for it.
I'm fully expecting part 1 of book 2 to just be, here's what happened in the first book, actually explained.
It's not really Brandon's style, I don't think. There
That
might
was
be some
literally part 1
elements
of
of
Well
that,
of
but
Ascension.
I don't think it'll be like a whole section. I think it'll be like, you know, the preambles or something.
That was pretty much part 1 of Well of Ascension.
But that was also, again, an early Sanders book.
Yeah.
True.
And we do get a lot of, here's some deep Cosmere theory in Rhythm of War, and that is not the most popular of the Stormlight books.
Yeah.
Partly because of that. Like, there are parts that read like a chemistry book. But I do agree that it is going to be very important, and I am also in agreement that I want it. I want it now. Because I actually like those parts of Rhythm of War.
I do too. I greatly do. So, okay. Last question. Why is it certain people are tied strongly to Aondor then? Like, we know allomantically people, it's just genetic impurity. We know Stormlight, it has to do with what level of oath you're at. Why are certain Elantrians stronger than others?
Is it your connection to the shard, or is that simplifying it too much?
We don't know.
All I can think of it. That's the only reason I can think. People have more devotion in their heart.
There could be some sort of silent genetic marker that we aren't aware of yet because the people in the story aren't aware of it, so... Or it could be that it's just the rule of 14, like 1 in 14 have the chance, and of those, 1 in 14 is going to be stronger, and of those, 1 in 14 is going to be stronger, and...
Why?
We don't know.
Maybe... Yeah, I don't know. What if when you're born there's like a connection to fortune, and there's like
14
some...
16.
16.
It's 16. I don't know why you were saying 14.
Yeah, because I had a little brain fart.
But the spiritual realm is using fortune to connect investiture to your soul identity.
Because, like, from a coding standpoint, sure, there are other people who know how to do, like, different code and greater code, but it's like doing a basic thing, one's not going to be better than the other. If 2 people do the same line of code, one is not going to be better than the other.
That's a difficult analogy because, like, we're not looking at one line of code. We're looking at one piece of software developed in BASIC versus one piece of software developed in C#.
Nah, because they were saying, like, so you have two Elantrians. One's apparently got a greater connection to Aeon Door. They both do A. One is brighter than the other.
Maybe
make
that guy's got more
sense.
RAM. I don't know.
It just... It doesn't make sense. Unless, like, one's more devotion.
Reader, there are some things that just aren't gonna make sense yet because we
I mean,
don't
it
have
is-
more books.
It is still a magic
true.
system, and if it were to be fully understood, it wouldn't be magical.
I mean, could it just be as simple as like, you know, the shard that ends up giving that power, like, if your personality traits are pretty closely aligned to its intent, then you're gonna have a stronger connection to it.
Exactly, it's just more devotion.
It makes as much sense as any other theory that we have. Like, in this case, we just don't know yet.
No, we don't know anything.
Cosmere speculations.
Right? I can tell you one thing we do
Anything
know.
else? Okay.
The more skilled your soul stamp that turns you into an Elantrian, the stronger you can make yourself as an Elantrian.
Yeah. But is it stronger as in the more power you can get output, or the more skilled you are on what aeons and the
Yes.
the extras you can do?
Both.
Okay. Anything else?
You didn't like
Literally
that answer.
rewriting your own history, you can make it however you see fit. If that means you're more talented at drawing the Aeons, then it's that. If it means you have more raw oomph to your Aeons, it's that too.
Yeah, but I feel like the oomph has to be coming from somewhere.
Sure, it's the pipeline. It's how big is the channel that you can open up to the door, to kind of put it in the terms that we have.
I feel like until somebody in world knows why some Elantrians are stronger, you can't make a soul stamp saying I get stronger.
Well, yeah.
Sure you can. Because
I mean, you can have one.
becoming an
You can have
Elantrian
one that-
is part of your history, and so if you can rewrite that history, I became a very powerful Elantrian versus I became an Elantrian.
But it's all about becauses and whys. There's always a trace back to it. And without knowing the because or the why, the stamp wouldn't work. Which, don't even get me started on how you can stamp and make an Elantrian appear on Scadrial somehow. I don't know how she worked that into it.
I don't know. Maybe you only have to
So
write.
Which we don't
Well-
know.
Maybe there's already Elantrians on schedule.
Maybe she only had to rewrite her history up to the point where she gets to Silverlight, and then she can follow a
Right.
similar.
Do we know she went to
historical path.
Silverlight?
Right, like if there's a couple Elantrians on schedule that she knows or something, she could, you know, it's not. It has to be like somewhat feasible, right? But if she knows even one who's taken some way to get there, then I guess it could be feasible to her.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the Elantrians outside of Scadrial in the cognitive realm.
So
So there's probably at least one on there.
Yeah. Okay. Do we
Those
have
are weird.
anything else to say for this chapter?
No.
Praise Jadeth.
Well, that's
That
going to
was
just
so
about
happy
cover
to
it for
be
this
done.
episode. Thank you so much for joining us on Ramblings and Predictions. This has been Cosmere Connections, and we hope to see you next time. recording in 3, 2. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cosmere Corrections. Gosh darn it. This is what I get for rewatching the TikToks.
Oh, that was great.
Flawless execution.
I am very sleep deprived right now.
Apparently.
We
Okay,
could do
apparently
about
I just-
episodes.
Okay.
I think we've got enough on our
Try-
plate as it is, though.
Yeah. Okay. Going again in 3, 2,